Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. As always, we'll be starting in just a minute. Got a couple of things to talk about this week, mostly Windows stuff this week, a big Windows episode. So I think we're long overdue that because I feel like the last few weeks we've always been talking about AI, and although we will be talking about AI in context to Windows, but there's a lot of non-AI stuff to talk about today as well for Windows, so that's fun. Some news about Windows 12 ? Potentially, if we're going to talk about what the Windows boss said this week about what's next for Windows, and that could very well end up shaping up to be a Windows 12. Not that they've explicitly confirmed that, but what comes after Windows 11? I mean, there's only one other number. It says 12.
Windows AI. They're just going to call it that.
I hope not. It's such a lame name.
Windows God.
Windows Girlfriend Edition.
Yeah, oh my God. That's for Japan.
Hey Zach, how does it feel to finally have dark mode file copy dialogues? Feels great. We will be talking about that on the show as well. It's like Windows 12 really is around the corner. Because I can't see why they'd fix that now, 4 years into Windows 11's life cycle. Has to be for Windows 12. As a joke, probably. All right, are you ready to start?
Yeah, just let me set myself away. Bring up that. And we're number 377, right?
Yes.
All right. I am now recording.
I'm now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 377 for August 15th, 2025. Hey everyone, Dean Rubino here, joined by Zac Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. We are a day late this week due to, well, Zac had a big review that went up this week and he needed a little bit of a break. Of course, we'll be talking about that. That is the Surface Neo review, which has been a long time in the making. We'll go over the potentials for that device and whether or not Microsoft should ever try again to do something like that. Also, of course, the latest on Windows 11. Microsoft announced it is going to be putting a lot more effort into improving gaming on Windows on ARM PCs or Windows on Snapdragon PCs. And the Windows lead talks about the next version of Windows, which could be Windows 12, although we were just discussing potential names for it. But we'll talk about what it means and what they're kind of envisioning. Zac, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm not too bad. It's been another busy week for us at Windows Central, but I'm feeling pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad. We just had a heat wave and it just finally ended, which means you guys will be getting.
We're in the middle of it right
weather
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, there is relief coming, thankfully. But yeah, and I took your advice and saw The Naked Gun this week, which was a lot of fun. We also did a Riff Tracks, and then on Mondays, the 50th anniversary of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is crazy. And then Shin Godzilla is back in cinemas too with a 4K version, which is pretty cool. So busy week for movies. But other than that, let's just jump into it. Let's go through the Windows 11 news. There were some new details on builds and stuff and new features. Why don't you go over that? Tell us what's new. Also, I forgot you didn't put the Edge browser thing into this.
Oh, yes, we can talk about that. We'll talk about that with the Windows 11 stuff. So let's start with the actual Windows OS news this week. There's quite a fair bit happened to Windows this week in the Insider program, which is nice to see. I feel like it's been quite quiet in the Insider program over the last couple of weeks. But this week, we actually got some builds with some stuff in it. So let's go through that now. So the Canary channel, the channel which I've told everybody to avoid for a long time now because it's missing a whole bunch of features and it seems to sort of have been abandoned or left by the wayside by Microsoft in the last year or so. This week, it finally got a build that sort of brought it up to scratch with a lot of the features it's been missing over the last year, especially around Copilot Plus PC. So if you have been using a Canary, if you've had a Copilot Plus PC in the Canary channel, and you've been waiting for things like recall and click to do and AI and search to appear on your device, good news, the build that came out this week has all of that stuff in it finally. So even though this is Microsoft's most experimental, least stable channel, it's the very last to get the Copilot Plus stuff, which is insane if you think about it. But it does finally have it. Although still not everything is there. They do mention they're still working to enable some features like image descriptions in narrator. And there's also the possibility that there will be some additional bugs in these features on these Canary channel builds compared to the dev and beta channel builds, which is to be expected considering it is supposed to be the most experimental, least stable branch / channel of Insider builds. So that makes sense, but it is finally up to date now when it comes to Copilot Plus stuff for the most part. And I'm hoping this is a sign of change for the Canary channel, because it's all well and good if it gets caught up today, but will it stay caught up or will it fall behind again in the coming weeks? Because if it will, then there's no point going back to the Canary channel even now. My advice would be to not, if you're not running the Canary channel currently, stay off it for now, and we'll see how things play out over the next month or two. If week by week the Canary channel is able to keep up with the dev channel with features and stuff, then sure, then maybe it's time to start recommending the Canary channel again for those who want that sort of on the edge type of lifestyle. But I suspect that it will fall behind again. I'd be very surprised if Microsoft's able to keep these things consistent where the Canary channel gets features first or alongside the dev channel. I just don't think that's going to happen. And so yeah, so that's really quite interesting for the Canary channel. They also got updated to include things like the improved snipping tool, stickers in Paint and whatnot, and some other quality of life improvements as well. But the more interesting stuff, of course, is happening in the dev and beta channels as per usual. So just today, as of right now, about an hour ago rather, the dev and beta channels got updated with a whole bunch of new stuff, including new selection modes in Click to Do. So the sort of bar that floats along the top when you open Click to Do now will have the option to sort of select or circle specific parts of the screen that you want to highlight. Very similar, if not identical, to Circle to Search on Google phones or Android phones. So they're really sort of leaning into this whole, overlay, AI overlay that you can circle things to find out more information about. That's basically coming to Windows 1-for-1 now, which is quite cool to see. They're also improving the open with menu. Believe it or not, if you currently on shipping builder Windows, if you right click and open with, that menu, all the icons in there will have like a box around them, which looks terrible. They're finally fixing that and removing that background. So that's nice to see. They're also adding animations to the thumbnail previews when you hover over icons on the taskbar. This was discovered a number of months ago, but it's now officially rolling out for testers. And so when you hover over different icons, there will be a smooth animation that moves between them, which is really quite nice. But what's more interesting about these builds are the features that are yet to be announced, but have already been discovered. Phantom of Earth on X is great when it comes to finding new features on these builds. And one of the ones he's finally found this week is a feature that enables dark mode in a lot more of the system, especially around File Explorer. If we cast our minds back, one of my biggest complaints about Windows 11 since its inception was that dark mode was incomplete. It's been incomplete since Windows 10, but they never took the opportunity to fix it up with Windows 11. There was work going on internally to have that happen, but then that work was abandoned at some time in early 2021 before Windows 11 came out. And then, since then, we've just been stuck with the sort of weird dark mode that has light interfaces, setup we have today. But that appears to be finally being addressed. In the latest build, there is some IDs you can enable, which will enable dark mode in the copy dialogues, the property windows, and a couple of other minor interfaces here and there. So that's huge. That's probably the biggest news of the week, that we're finally getting dark mode in these File Explorer elements that have been always just never been given the dark mode treatment. And it's not like these are interfaces that you rarely see. If you're dealing with the File Explorer, you will see these interfaces multiple times a day. And if you're working late at night, 11 p.m., 12 a.m., and you're in dark mode and you try to copy a large file, you will be blinded by this copy dialog that pops up in pure white mode. And so it looks like they're finally going to address that, which a long time coming for sure. So super excited about that. So the Edge thing we want to mention. So there was a UI that was discovered in Edge that is quite a bit different from the UI that we currently have shipping in Edge. It was codenamed Olympia or Olympus, I can't remember now. And it basically it seemed like it was an interface that was being built around Copilot. So the address bar had a bigger emphasis on Copilot. It was the Copilot chat box rather than the current address bar we have now. It did have tabs still, but the tabs ran along below the address bar instead of above it. And the whole interface just seemed lighter and cleaner. The person who originally discovered this UI reckons that the UI has been scrapped. I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate, but they found it, so I mentioned that in the article. But it did seem like for a little while that Microsoft was building a dedicated UI for Edge that was more Copilot than browser. And my theory here is that this was supposed to be for Copilot mode. If you enable Copilot mode right now, the only real thing that changes in the interface is the Copilot button moves from being on the right-hand side of the window frame to inside the address bar on the left. That's the only real change. All the other changes are behind the scenes, obviously. But it would have been a bigger, more impactful feature or mode, I guess, if the UI did change. Imagine if you enabled Copilot mode and it gave you a brand new looking browser that was more Copilot influenced, more Copilot powered, whatever you want to call it. It seems like that's what Microsoft was experimenting with this new Olympia UI. Now, we don't know the current status of it. It has sort of been stagnating in the builds for a while. It is hidden. It's not something you can enable via flags, but it is in there, and it is something that they put some code towards, and who knows if it will end up shipping or not. But it is interesting to see Microsoft at least exploring a more dedicated AI interface, I guess, for the Edge browser. Again, I'm assuming this would have paired with Copilot mode, because I think that just makes the most sense. Especially there was also a mode where I know there's vertical tabs in the current Edge, but this mode, I think, put them in vertical tabs by default and also hid them to the side. You couldn't immediately see your tabs in this new UI, and I think that's because they wanted Copilot to handle your tabs for you. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But that was an interesting thing that was discovered this week. And then the last thing we wanted to briefly mention, although I have lost the link, it's really annoying, is that there was a release preview build this week, which, if I can find it, no, there it is. A release preview build for 24H2, which has a whole bunch of stuff in it that's been in testing over the last X amount of weeks/months in the Insider program. So Recall is getting the homepage. So actually, I should clarify what this release preview build represents is the next public Windows feature drop, more or less. So this will likely roll out as the cumulative update preview release later this month, and it will begin rolling out to everyone in the September Patch Tuesday update. That's usually how it goes. And so here's what you can expect in that September Patch Tuesday. The updated Recall homepage, which now shows you like an overview of some highlighted snapshots and other things. A new tutorial for Click to Do. Seconds in the taskbar clock. When you click on the actual date button, it will give you the seconds and dates and stuff in the calendar flyout, which is nice. There's a couple of things here which I have not seen before, so I don't know what these are. So they say, when you search from the Windows taskbar, a new grid view will help you more quickly and accurately identify the desired image within your search. I've not seen this, so I don't know if this has been in testing for a while, if this is one of those things that they've just snuck into a public build without testing. Maybe they have been testing it. I've just not seen it. And now they also say the taskbar will now provide clearer status information. If your search results are incomplete while your PC is organizing files in the background, Windows will show a notice with a link to check progress. They're also rolling out the updated widgets interface on the lock screen, so you'll be able to customize which widgets appear there if you're outside of the EEA. Up until now, that has apparently only been exclusive to the European Economic Area, but that's now rolling out globally, which is nice. And then AI actions in File Explorer will be rolling out to the public as well. So that includes image actions and AI actions for Microsoft 365 and some other minor stuff here and there. So yeah, quite a lot going on for Windows this week. It seems that Microsoft is preparing a big feature drop for Windows 11 24H2 that should begin rolling out to everyone next month. No word on when things like the new start menu is supposed to drop for the public. I would maybe guess it would be nice if they were planning to tie that to 25H2, which, given 25H2 hasn't reached the release preview ring yet, my guess for the timeline for 25H2 is it will hit release preview next month and will roll out in October. That would sort of align with what they've done in the past. And hopefully with the 25H2 drop, we will get some features that ship alongside that, including hopefully the new start menu. I think that would make sense. But there's no reason why that new start menu can't also roll out on 24H2. Microsoft, I think, has said on record that they intend to basically roll out everything that's built for 25H2 on 24H2 because there's no reason to not do it. They share the same platform, the same code base. They're serviced in the same way. It would just be strange to not deliver the features to both, especially given 24H2 at this point is probably the most used version of Windows 11 on the market currently. And so to give everyone as many features as possible, they're just going to target both, which makes sense. So that's sort of the latest in regards to new features on Windows 11. Is there anything there, Dan, that stands out to you around
Should
Edge
also
or
mention Surface Pro 11 and Laptop 7, I believe, both got firmware updates that restricted the battery use. So for those, we're seeing this more and more across devices, and this idea of you don't charge past 80%, which is such a it's such a weird thing. But what that does, of course, is it preserves the battery. If you're always hitting 100% and then bringing it down and fully discharging it, fully recharging it, like this is bad for the battery. And so they now have, it's just an option. You can check it that it'll go to 80%. You can even have it so that you can check another box. It'll charge to 100% that one time. So say you're going on a trip, and then all of the times it'll go back to 80%. I'll say my car does the same thing. Tesla has this built in. They recommend 80% for, regular usage. If you're going to go on a big trip, you can put it at 100%. But it's the same thing. The more you keep your phone on a charger and at around 80%, instead of letting it completely discharge, the longer you're going to preserve the battery. And that's important. As we know, Surface laptops and Pro 11 are not easy to open. They're easier than they were years ago, but still swapping out a battery in them is certainly not trivial. I see this feature. Lenovo often has this. Dell often has this. Samsung's phones have this too. So you're starting to see this become a more standard feature, which I guess is pretty cool. As far as the other Windows stuff, I don't know. I don't really have anything to contribute to
That's
that.
fair.
So I think the Edge stuff was interesting, only because I am a big fan of Copilot. I use it all the time. So I am interested in trying out sort of new modalities with it or interfaces. If you go into Edge flags, so Edge ://flags, and you type in Copilot, you'll see a bunch of experiments that they're using, and you can enable them. And sometimes they even have different options in the drop-down menus that you can try out. But there's different stuff, like instead of having Copilot slide out from the side, they now have it so that when you click it in the taskbar, it's a drop-down menu. It's like a little chat window. But they also have a version, I think, that pops up from the bottom, which is kind of interesting as well. So they're kind of experimenting with that stuff. So if you like playing around with it, I say go ahead. But yeah, I mean, this will kind of lead into, I guess, actually, maybe we'll just lead into it now, the Windows lead talking about the next version of Windows, because how we use AI and Copilot and how it's going to change computing, I think is a big question mark at this point, because, well, why don't you go into the next story and explain what's going on here?
Yeah, so hot on the heels of last week's Windows 2030 Vision video series, I guess, which launched, where Microsoft started talking about what they foresee for Windows in the next 5 years. This week, the boss of Windows, Pavan Devaluri, weighed in on the same topic, more or less, not as part of the 2030 Vision series, but as like a standalone interview that Microsoft published independently from that series for some strange reason. But yes, this week he was on record, basically echoing the same stuff we discussed last year. So I'll quote him verbatim, and then we can break down what it is he said in the video. So here's some of the more interesting stuff. He was asked how AI is going to change the way we interact with computers, and here's what Davaluri had to say on the matter. He said, "I think we will see computing become more ambient, more pervasive, continue to span form factors, and certainly become more multimodal in the arc of time. I think experience diversity is the next space where we will continue to see voice becoming more important. Fundamentally, the concept that your computer can actually look at your screen and is context aware is going to become an important modality for us going forward." So there's a lot to break down there. It once again highlights the idea of using more than just a keyboard and mouse to interact with your computer. It's heavily leaning on voice as a primary input mode for using a PC in the future. And they also sort of tease the idea of the operating system Windows being context aware, capable of looking at your screen and understanding your intent based on what it is you're actively working on. Windows kind of has this feature already with Recall, but it's not active. You sort of have to go into the app and search what it is for it to be able to semantically identify an image or an item or some text that you want to find. What this sounds like is that, especially with the word ambient, excuse me, I was trying to fight that off for so long. There we go. Especially with the word ambient, it seems like they're implying that Windows will be able to just constantly see what you see actively, and you'll be able to just ask the computer a question or command it to do something on the fly without needing to go to a button or enable a special mode to do so first, which is how things currently are on Windows 11. Copilot Vision is a mode within an app. You have to manually go there to initiate it before Copilot can be helpful. It seems like they're moving towards this ambient experience where Copilot will always be running, will always be capable, always be ready to assist you based on what it is it can see right alongside you. And so Davalery continues, he says, you'll be able to speak to your computer while you're writing, inking, or interacting with another person. You should be able to have a computer semantically understand your intent to interact with it. He also says, I think what human interfaces look like today and what they look like in 5 years from now is one big area of thrust for us that Windows continues to evolve. The operating system is increasingly agentic and multimodal. That is an area of tremendous investment and change for us. So yeah, he's also teasing there that UI will be different with the introduction of generative agentic AI and being able to use the computer with your voice in addition to a mouse and keyboard. Interfaces will change because we will no longer need things like toolbars and other sort of more advanced complex interfaces that give us access to more minute or complex capabilities within operating systems or apps. We could just ask the Copilot to it, the assistant. Hey, assistant, can you blur this background in Photoshop? Hey, Copilot, can you run the numbers on this data set that I've just generated? You know, anything goes essentially when it comes to human language and these agentic AIs being able to understand your intent. And so this is what the boss of Windows is saying. Now, if he's saying this, then it seems likely this is where we're heading. Last week, it was the head of enterprise and security, which, you know, I'm sure he has some insight as to what's next for Windows, but his expertise is certainly not in the UX layer of Windows. The boss of Windows, he would, of anybody in the company, he probably knows the most about where Windows is headed in the next few years. And if he says this is where Windows is going, then this is where Windows is going. Now, the public reaction to this has not been very positive. If you take a look at online forums and comment sections covering the story, there are a lot of people outright rejecting this, saying they don't want it. This isn't what they want the next version of Windows to look and be like. But I think it's inevitable. It seems like if Microsoft isn't going to do it, other companies will. Like Apple is rumored to be working on a similar feature where you'll be able to control your iPhone with your voice or your iPad with your voice. It wouldn't not surprise me if macOS gets the same treatment. And Android, I mean, who knows what Android's doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's also coming to Android as well. I do know Honor already has a feature on their phones where you can interact with an assistant for it to navigate through apps for you. This is just the first steps. They're laying the foundation for a totally ambient, a totally agentic OS that can do things on your behalf based on you just asking it to do something. So Dan, what are your thoughts on this? This is, if anything, this is rock solid confirmation that whatever the next version of Windows is, whether that's Windows 12 or something ambiguous or abstract, it seems it's going to be AI driven.
Yeah, I'm one of those people, obviously, and we've said this before on the podcast, that all this AI stuff is inevitable. Like, sure, we can talk about the risks and the dangers and all that. I shared that story today, right? Some person at MIT, student, just like, didn't they like drop out of MIT or something like that? Or they said like there's no point in graduating since AI is going to kill us all. It's like this to me was such a Gen Z answer to something, dire. But, putting that stuff aside, you're right. I mean, the companies are just going to go ahead with this stuff, and it really kind of is the future, whether we like it or not. I'm actually one of those people, by the way, like, just because I say this up as inevitable doesn't mean I currently love the state of technology. I actually do kind of miss the 90s in a lot of ways, where things were simpler. Now I'm definitely sounding like an old person, but I don't know if all this technology has necessarily helped. It's been amazing, but like social networks, I feel like have been really a big letdown, So what Microsoft does here, I don't think they have a choice. First of all, it's been very profitable for them already between Azure and hosting and developing stuff and working with OpenAI, right? This has put them ahead of the pack. Apple's been stuck spinning its wheels. I'm sure they'll eventually come out with something, but Google, meanwhile, is going ahead and doing a lot with Gemini. So it's like this stuff is, they have to think about it. So the $1 million question is, all right, so knowing this stuff is coming, like, what does that look like for an operating system on your laptop or your desktop? It's a tough question. I don't know. And the voice thing, in a sense, I get it, because for the first time, voice is, you're not restricted to commands and canned statements to make things happen. You can just talk and the thing will understand you. That really is a big game changer. But the question, of course, is why were people not using voice before? Because we've had that stuff for years, whether it's on your phone or your PC. I bet some of the answer is because you have to memorize these phrases and it's tough to use. There's no doubt about it. But there has to also be an aspect of, because it feels weird to talk to my computer. It feels weird to talk to my phone. We don't have that issue like that fad now with people walking around with their phone on speakerphone, right? Like before, people would excuse themselves to go have a conversation with someone. Now they walk around in public and let everybody hear their conversation. So when it's another human, they don't, not only do they not mind it, they don't mind sharing it with the world, which is really annoying. Again, one of the things I don't like about where technology has gone. But I don't know if that's the solution here for the OS. Granted, there's going to be a lot more to it than that, right? You and I have talked about this idea that once AI is sort of preemptive, that is, you sit in front of the computer, 10 a.m., you're at work, it already knows the stuff you want and it's already doing things for you, preparing stuff and getting your emails ready. And without having to ask it, is going to be, I think, more interesting. We both love to click to do stuff a ton, and that's an example of more, it's machine learning, but still technically under the rubric of AI. So I don't know. I'm not really, and the ambient computing has been tossed around for years at Microsoft. The 3 screens in a cloud, going back then, they were talking about, remember there was that version of Windows that they're supposed to be doing for like wall computers that, and I'm not just talking about the Surface Hub. I'm talking about there was going to be a home version of Windows where you would have like a wall mounted computer, and it would be like what the Samsung fridges kind of do, but way more powerful. Like that was an example of like ambient computing that they were thinking about. I don't know though. I just don't know if the voice stuff is going to be the key to this. I get the allure. I think they should probably try it, but I just don't see myself talking to my PC every day. But maybe, I don't know.
I think a lot of people are in the headspace that Microsoft wants to replace the keyboard and mouse with voice, and while that will certainly be possible, I don't think that's what will be. I don't think that's the only thing I don't think that will be the only way to interact with the computer. I think mouse and keyboard will still be a vital part of the computing experience. You'll still have laptops with a mouse and keyboard built in, of course. And if you're seeing it at desktop, you'll still have dedicated mouse and keyboard peripherals. It's just that voice will become a third primary input method. You don't have to use it, but if you wanted to, you could. And if you do master it and figure it out, you will be able to use your computer in ways that you previously couldn't, and in ways people who don't talk to their computers can't. So I guess maybe the best example is if you're actively writing up a report and you want to find out information or want to know the definition of a particular word, you can be writing, you could type the word and go, Copilot, can you just remind me what the definition of the word I just wrote is? And then keep writing, and Copilot can sort of hover over the interface and go, yeah, here's the definition, and talk to you, say out loud, or show you a UI for it. I think that's how Microsoft is visioning this, although they're doing a poor job at explaining that. I think, well, because they've not announced anything. This is already like, conceptual, high level discussions, but it's very clear that this is where they do want to go. And I'm assuming when they do announce this, it will click for a lot of people. Go, oh, that actually does make sense, because right now I think people are viewing it as like the old school voice command control feature in Windows Vista, where you have to open an app, press on a mic button, and then you wait for it to stop so it's quiet, and you go open start. Edge. That's not how it's going to be. Like, you will be able to use natural language. You're like, hey, can you check on my flight? I'm supposed to be leaving in 3 hours. Let's make sure it's not delayed. Copilot will do that, and it will just show you the result as like a hover, something hovering on the screen, or as a sidebar. Who knows what the interface will look like? But the idea is voice will allow you to continue what you are working on while doing additional tasks in the background handled by Copilot. I think that's how they're going to market this and how it's going to be implemented in the system.
Another similar kind of example that I actually would like to see, and Google is rumored to be doing this with the new Pixels, is their photo app is rumored to be able to have voice interaction. In other words, you take a photo and then you just tell the AI the edits you want it to do. Make it blurry in the background, remove that person on the upper left corner, take out the shadow, remove the glare, doing that kind of stuff. And then the AI is supposed to go ahead and do that. I think that's really cool. That kind of stuff I could definitely see. Same thing with an office, like, so you don't have to have a degree in Excel. You could just tell it, like, listen, I just want you to do this and do that, and it'll do it for you, right? I think that is sort of a really interesting aspect of this. And like I said, I think we'll see that with Google first with the photo editing, but that kind of use of technology, I think really is kind of impressive, because we said this before, using Photoshop is technically like a skill. Like there's a lot in Photoshop when you open it. Same with, editing a video, but there's no reason why you can't shoot a video of yourself for 5 minutes and then give it to like AI and just be like, make a video like Mr. Beast with all the edits and stuff, and find some B-roll. Here's some B-rolls, but find some other things. Especially like maybe it's like if I'm doing a video and I'm talking about Surface Pro 11, it'll go find B-roll of Surface Pro 11 and video itself, right, or create it itself, right? And do all your edits for you. Because again, editing video is a skill. And, the question, of course, is, or the issue is that you're basically asking AI at that point to replicate what other people are doing. At what point does AI go, it creates its own style of editing, right? So like right now, the rapid cuts are in vogue, right? But there's also been kind of a pushback towards simpler videos of people just talking at their cameras and stuff. So like at what point does the AI get smart enough to sort of create its own style for you versus just copying what others are doing? That's going to be an interesting inflection point if and when that happens. So,
yeah, I mean, it is clear this is where Microsoft wants to take the next version of Windows. It remains to be seen if this is Windows 12, so to speak, or if this is an offshoot of Windows that only runs on new device types and stuff. That's all remains to be seen. But it does seem that Microsoft is taking Windows down a path where you will be able to interact with it with voice alone. Like you won't have to use a mouse and keyboard to get tasks done on Windows, which is important because it will allow Windows to sort of become ambiguous in regards to device form factor. Again, it could allow Windows to run on, say, like we have to imagine what are these AI devices going to look like? Will they have screens on them? Maybe not. Like the Humane AI pin, for example, didn't have a screen on it. Whatever OpenAI is building, I don't know. Actually, I've not checked out the rumors, but I don't think it's supposed to have a screen. The idea of this always listening, always present sort of pebble or stone, I don't know what they're going to look and feel like, but this idea that you have this device that hasn't got a screen on it, that's personal, but it's listening and you can talk to it and it can reply to you, that allows Windows to be part of that picture because they've built out the system to the point where they can just allow it to run without a UI. And that solves Windows' biggest problem when it came to phones, is that it didn't have a UI or apps that scaled to that screen size. If you remove the screen entirely, suddenly Windows makes sense on these smaller pocketable devices again. I'm just saying, this is why Microsoft would like the world to go down this path. They want voice control. They want, experiences that don't require UI to become the norm, because that allows Windows to stay relevant. Because Windows's biggest weakness is its UI, its app availability. And so especially with more and more apps and stuff becoming web apps, it's not like Windows doesn't have the apps these days that people need. And so, yeah, I think this is for Microsoft to remain relevant in the mobile space. If the smartphone evolves into this Pebble-like AI device, whatever it might be, then Windows has a chance at becoming a mobile operating system again. But that's very high level, very long way off type thinking there. I think in the immediate, we are going to see this hybrid where most people are using it with a keyboard and mouse, and sometimes interacting with the interface with their voice when it's relevant to do so. Like the biggest one for me would be, if I see a notification come in, I can just ask Copilot to deal with that notification, whether that be to dismiss it or to reply with whatever quick criteria I give it, to be able to have the Copilot do things on my behalf in the background as they sort of are prompted to me is a thing that isn't currently possible on any platform, which would be amazing if it was. And this is why I always come back to the phrase like AI is best when it's invisible. If I'm able to command the AI without having to go to it first, that's the best AI. Like if it brings me something that I need to deal with, and then I can ask it to deal with it, that is amazing. Like that's the kind of AI I want. And right now we don't have that. Every single AI feature in Windows is a mode that you have to go to initiate. You have to go into Paint to do whatever it is you can do with AI and Paint. You have to go to Recall to have to do whatever it is you can do with AI and Recall. There's no ambient AI experience in Windows yet, and there's no ambient AI experience in any of these OS platforms. We're yet to see what an operating system can be like when it's built from scratch or from the ground up with AI woven through it. Every AI experience to date is an app or an overlay on top of an existing UX paradigm. So we haven't really felt the advantages of next gen AI being a productivity tool yet. And I'm guessing that's what we're going to see with air quotes Windows 12 or whatever this next future version of Windows is that Microsoft has suddenly really started teasing. It does feel like this has sort of come and started being teased quite a bit more heavily than it has been in the last year. And I'm wondering if Microsoft is getting ready to actually make some kind of announcement. I would be surprised, but I do know that Microsoft has been experimenting with this stuff since 2023. So it's been 2 years now since they started actively working on stuff like this. And 2 to 3 years into development, I think maybe that Microsoft is ready to start showing off, or at least talking about the stuff that it intends to deliver in the next 5 years. But do I expect Windows 12 launching in 2026 with a brand new UI that's with an agentic experience? I don't think so. Maybe 2027, 2028 is probably more likely for that. But again, who knows? Is this going to be a direct upgrade for Windows 11 users? Is this going to be a new version of Windows that you can only buy on certain hardware? All questions we don't know at this point. And so it does remain to be seen what and how Microsoft will conduct itself and future versions of Windows in this sort of new AI era, because there's going to be pushback. People aren't going to like this, especially when it comes to the privacy concerns and the amount of data it requires to make an AI like this useful. A lot of people aren't going to be happy with sort of giving up all of their data. And Pavan, even in the interview, mentions that, for all of this to be possible, we're going to have to find a good balance between on-device AI and cloud AI, hybrid compute, they call it. Because this won't be possible if you're trying to process everything locally. It's going to have to reach out to the cloud for definitions and object analysis and whatever it may be. Like the NPU on these devices isn't capable of holding all of that information in, so that it doesn't have to reach out to the cloud ever. It's going to have to send some data there. And so Microsoft needs to find the right balance as to what people are comfortable with being shared to the cloud versus what they're not. And they also need to make sure the operating system has the option to turn off the data sharing if they don't want it, even if that means having a worse off experience as a result. Like maybe the AI can't do XYZ capability because you've chosen not to share this type of data with Microsoft in the cloud. And the user has to sort of just grin and bear that if that's not what they want. And so, yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
There's a couple issues too. One is, technology used to move a lot slower, but the AI stuff is moving very quickly. So how do you build an OS around what is essentially a bullet train going really fast? Like it's almost difficult to predict where this stuff will be and capabilities will have even in 2 years. So how do you make the OS modular enough that the AI component can grow with the operating system and not be too locked into the current paradigm of what we consider to be AI? I think that's a huge challenge, because before you could be like, oh, the internet's coming. Let's build. Remember, Windows before internet was not built really to be online. They had to kind of build out these kind of features, including the browser, but even dial up and all the other support components. And then it was like, all right, what else can I do online? So you had to build that out, but that took years to happen because it was so slow moving, but this isn't. So how do you create an operating system that will be both advanced but not outdated within 6 months? So I think that's one challenge. The other thing about mobile is interesting, is talking about like apps again, is can you, like, I always picture again in like movies and stuff, when people pull out phones, they don't have like a giant app grid, right? Or an app store, and they're going through apps. It's just like an operating system that does kind of everything. So could we actually have something like that? Like you log in, it reminds me a little bit of Windows Phone 7. With Windows Phone 7, for those who remember, they used to have the People Hub. What the People Hub was so cool about was you would log into your various social networks and services. And so I could go and click Zac's picture, and I could see what he's posted on Twitter, what he's posted on Facebook, and all that. I didn't actually need the apps to go and do that stuff, right? That concept is still super interesting, because if you have an operating system, you log into all your stuff, all your banking, your social networks, all that, and then you just have an interface where you can be like, hey, show me my Twitter feed, and it just pulls up a Twitter feed using a generic UX UI generating system, or you take a photo and it has a generic Photos app, of course, but then you can do those edits, like I was just saying, with just using your voice. Like, at what point does the services will still be there, but they'll be kind of be invisible, and you won't need 9,000 apps. It'll just be the operating system plugged into all those things. And again, this comes back to your question about privacy and your information, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, imagine if you could just bring up Telegram, just has its own chat window that comes in, right? And it's sort of like a generic system at the operating system. And don't forget, what makes this really fascinating is this idea that, like, they're replacing developers, or they're trying to replace developers with AI. What happens if your operating system was smart enough where it could build an app for itself when it needed it?
Or an interface. Like
Yeah.
imagine being able to just tell Copilot, hey, I want Windows to look like this, and then it can build that interface for you. That's
Right.
totally
You
possible.
kind of see that now, actually, a little bit. It's kind of corny, but in Edge and in Outlook now, at least, and some people have this, there is this AI thing built in for themes. So you can tell it to build a theme. You tell it, like, I'll usually do like purple or blue 80s retro look and all this, and it'll theme up a background and colors, and it'll do all this, and it asks, do I want that? I hit apply, and it saves it. And in Outlook, they have it now with your background. The backgrounds can change based on like weather and all this kind of stuff around you, which is kind of neat. So yeah, you're always starting to see a little bit of that. But yeah, what you're talking about is like way more advanced. I mean, this will be possible, I imagine. So they have to be thinking about that kind of stuff too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think the possibilities are endless now that AI is here, and Microsoft has embraced it fully. I mean, as well, with OpenAI rumored to be working on hardware, Microsoft must know where that is on the timeline for them, and like, do they have a response planned for that? Who knows? And will anything that they do have ready to respond with, will it run Windows? I think it could, given they seem to be trying to cement Windows as this AI platform that can do all of this AI stuff. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It does sound like the next few years are going to be really interesting when it comes to Windows.
Just to address some comments going on about microphones and the quality of them impacting the successfulness of using such a system, I will say that currently, like, Copilot Plus PCs are limited to laptops. You could probably see something similar for that. And the reason I say that is because these laptops do ship with really good microphones these days, right? They have multiple microphones, and you can control the directionality of them. It's going to pick up everything in the environment, or is it going to just be aimed at you? Some allow you to choose, it'll amplify multiple voices. So if you're like in a conference, or just yours. And of course, a lot of them all have some sort of noise canceling, smart AI type stuff to enhance your voice or mask out noise and stuff like that. So you can build out that hardware very easily in laptops to control for this issue. Older desktops become a problem. And I think this is also why we haven't seen Copilot Plus roll out for desktops, even though people keep reminding us that my NVIDIA RTX 4070 card can easily handle that stuff, which is technically true, but it gets away from the point of what a Copilot Plus PC is supposed to be. So that stuff is solvable. But yeah, you would just start building hardware that's tweaked a little bit more towards this technology. I don't think that's a difficult task.
Yeah. So that's basically it when it comes to what Pavan Davuluri said. It is worth talking about because, like I said, this is the boss of Windows. He's currently in charge of Windows and Surface. So he's in charge of both the software and hardware. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he's also working on hardware that would sort of tie into this Windows 12. What that looks like remains to be seen. Could it just be a normal laptop and tablet? Maybe. Could it be something more like a stone or I don't know, some humane AI pin type thing? Maybe. I know Yusuf Mehdi, Microsoft's CVP or consumer experiences. I can't remember what his role is, but he's on record saying that he expects Microsoft to explore Copilot hardware. The idea that there's dedicated peripherals, devices, whatever they may be, that run or are designed to only interact with via Copilot seems to be something that they have at least considered internally. And so maybe that's what we're going to see in the next couple of years as well. It is going to be some interesting times ahead for sure. Let's quickly move on to one more Windows story before we talk about the Neo stuff. Microsoft announced this week that they are going to improve gaming on ARM PCs. Now, this is notable because up until now, in the last year, we haven't really seen much change in regards to gaming on ARM PCs. We sort of know that it is possible, but given the emulation layer and a lot of games dependency on anti-cheat, a lot of them don't work or don't work well. But it seems Microsoft is committing to improving that. So in a blog post this week, Microsoft announced an update to the Xbox Game app, which will allow gamers to finally download games on ARM-based PCs. For those who didn't know, the Xbox app, when running on an ARM device, doesn't show you the ability to download games. It only shows you the ability to stream them. They're finally lifting that limit, so you'll now be able to go to the Microsoft Store and actually download PC games on these ARM-based devices, even if they're not natively compiled for ARM, which is what you've always been able to do on Steam and Epic Games Launcher and other third-party stores. But the Microsoft Store and the Xbox app, for some reason, prohibited the user from doing that until now. But in addition to that, they also announced that I'll read this word for word. They said, Windows and Xbox are working closely together to ensure compatibility across the catalog, and we're developing new features that will enable more games to be played on ARM-based Windows 11 PCs in the coming months. So that's a big sentence there. That they've mentioned a lot there, including the fact that they're building stuff out that will allow the catalog of games, a larger catalog of games to run on ARM. So they don't go into any technical details as to how they're going to do this, but it does sound like they're going to at least try to address some of the biggest issues when it comes to the emulation layer. Ideally, hopefully, that being how anti-cheat basically stops a lot of games in their tracks from running on the platform. If they could solve the anti-cheat problem, a lot of games would just run fine on ARM. Like things like Halo Infinite and MCC and Call of Duty and Fortnite and League of Legends, all of those games just outright refuse to run on ARM because of anti-cheat. If they can solve anti-cheat and maybe address some performance issues when it comes to the emulation layer, especially when it comes to AAA titles, then I think Snapdragon X will go from being an okay platform to play games on to a great one. What are your thoughts on that, Dan? Sorry.
Yeah, I did share in the comments. There is works on WOA.com. It's a website you can go to. So works on Windows on ARM is what it technically stands for. But yeah, works on WOA.com is a website where people go and you can look up video games that will play on ARM, and there's quite a few actually. Now, granted, a lot of the Call of Duty stuff doesn't, for the reason Zach pointed out, which is the anti-cheat system, which needs to be redone so it supports ARM64, which is happening. They are working on this, so it's a big deal. But that's kind of one of the reasons. This is what I talk about with very complicated games or apps, where it's not just the app itself, it's all the sub-libraries that it relies on. Also need to support ARM64 in some way, although they kind of got around a little bit of that with the EC stuff. But yeah, I think people are surprised. Like I had someone on Twitter, I was talking about this, and I'll bring up what they said about it because they say, I got to ask, what sort of games do you think will be available as a result of this? I can only see lightweight mobile games, which will really not make anyone want to buy a Windows on ARM device, in my opinion. It might lead to real games later on down the line, but I struggle to see this using Adreno. And see, this is like the constant issue that Qualcomm faces, is this idea of like their chips just aren't good. And, maybe you can run a mobile phone game and, that's about it. They can't do much more than that. And I'm like, it runs the Borderlands games, it runs Doom Eternal, it runs Cyberpunk, Forza 5. Like it runs all those well. Like, I don't mean like, I'm not trying to be technical here. Like the game technically loads up and it plays, but it's like 12 frames a second. No, like they play at 30 and 60 frames a second with real good gaming experiences. The chips are more than capable of doing that. But this is sort of the, dare I say, ignorance that this we're dealing with. Part of it is legacy, because yes, the old Qualcomm chips were terrible, and they blame ARM Limited, who designed the chips. Don't forget, Qualcomm at that point weren't making their own chips. They manufactured them, but they were based on designs that they licensed from ARM. And the fact was, ARM Limited, the corporation, just wasn't designing chips that were fast enough for PC, which is why Qualcomm went and bought a separate company built and made from ex-Apple engineers to design their own chips, which is what these new Snapdragon X processors are. So now that's why they were able to sort of leapfrog and really just jump over where they had been before. But this compatibility stuff, it still is a big deal. Although it's becoming less of a big deal too, because you have this real rise of cloud gaming, which works perfectly fine on Windows on ARM, obviously. But a lot of people do want to do local gaming too. But like I would say most of the games I have on my Steam account, which I have a lot, do play on there. There's probably two exceptions. One is anything that has anti-cheat, and really old games. Like sometimes they re-release, or they just have games that are still on Steam that are like 10 years old. If they use like DirectX 9 or something like that, I think they may have issues. So those are but everything else that's come out in the last couple of years plays surprisingly well on these devices. But the more they can do here, the better. You and I both love Qualcomm chips and think they're, for our needs. I was just telling Zach before the podcast how I kind of hate the laptop 7 now, because it's kind of ruined my, I don't want to test and use other laptops now. It's like, it's been too good. It's been like perfect. Like I just don't need anything else. If I had to just pick one laptop for the foreseeable future, it would just be laptop 7. That's even over Pro 11. I love the Pro 11, but the laptop 7 has just been partly because it's a bigger display. But yeah, hopefully we'll see some results of this. Of course, I should remind people of September. Qualcomm is going to have their Snapdragon Summit in Hawaii, and we are expecting them to finally review the second gen of the Snapdragon X processor line. And this is actually, they're skipping the first version used the Orion cores, and then Orion V2 cores came out for phone. They're going right to Orion V3 cores for the second gen, if that makes sense. So the line is the second gen, but the cores that it relies on are technically Gen 3, which is really interesting. But it's supposed to be, I heard, can beat the M4. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of details on that. What about the M4 Pro and which chips and all this kind of stuff? So we'll figure that out. But, and I know people are going to be like, but the M5 is going to come out, which is true. But like, they're doing really well. We'll see what surprises they have, but that's going to be a lot of fun to cover, to see where they are.
Indeed. So yeah, I will keep you updated on when, or how gaming improves on ARM over the next however many months it's going to be. They didn't give us an exact date for when these changes are expected to go into testing. They just simply said in the coming months. So we'll have to wait and see what actually ends up happening. I suspect we won't see the fruits of this labor until probably 2026 timeframe, which makes more sense. And that also timed with some more Xbox handhelds and consoles and other stuff that I think are planned for the next year or two.
That's a really big point, right? That Qualcomm is itching to get into the handheld gaming market. They already do it before Android devices, but they are absolutely salivating at doing a Windows Steam Deck kind of thing, but based on their hardware. And I think a lot of gamers want that too, because better battery life and of course. Less heat and all that kind of stuff.
Indeed. Right, let's move on to our, I guess, last story of the day, and that is indeed the Surface Neo. We finally reviewed it. I finally was able to sit down with one some time ago and basically just use one, an actual real Surface Neo for some time. And I was able to document my experience, and we never really intended to write a review on it. But then, time passed, and I became aware of there being actually a number of these sort of found online. And so I assumed it was only a matter of time before somebody else reviewed it first. And so I figured since we had already done it, more or less, we might as well put live the content we had on the matter. And so, yes, this week I published a Surface Neo review. Now, I don't have the device on me. It wasn't something I was allowed to keep. And so I can't show it to you on camera here. But I can talk about my experience with it and my thoughts on the device as a whole for when I did get time to use it when I did. And so I want to start with the hardware, because Dan also got a chance to hold the Surface Neo when they first announced it back in 2019. Now, I would be surprised if you can remember much about it, but
I was drunk.
Yeah. It is incredible hardware. It is probably the best bit of Microsoft Surface hardware I've ever held. It is unlike any other computing device I've touched in recent memory. It's so small and compact, but heavy and premium in a way that's just unlike anything else. You don't really get glass laptops, and so the idea that of this small 9-inch laptop that's covered in glass and just has these incredible hinges, it is a magical experience. And so opening that device up into the two 9-inch screens, which were bright and high resolution, so they were crisp, they were incredible. And I got to use it. So I got to sit down, I got to sort of walk around with it and type into it and use it like a computer. And I have a lot of thoughts about the Neo as a computer. My first one is it's too small. It is too small. At 9 inches, it's smaller than a Surface Go. And the keyboard, I also got to try the keyboard, smaller than a Surface Go's keyboard. And people already had issues with the Surface Go's keyboard. They were definitely going to have issues with the Surface Neo's keyboard. It was still a good tactile typing experience, I should say. Very cramped, but very tactile. If you could get used to it, I was able to bang out sentences at my usual words per minute after a tiny bit of time. And so it wasn't too bad. But the idea that you can flip the keyboard around onto the display and push it up so you can have like a virtual trackpad and an emoji panel and stuff on that bottom screen is fantastic. A genius idea for that device. Windows 10X, we've talked about Windows 10X to death. My only thoughts are I still think it has a superior UI to Windows 11, especially when it comes to dual screen. The ability to sort of flick windows between the two displays was fantastic. That's not something Windows 11 can do today. You can't flick windows between screens. The animations, the gestures, everything was just a lot smoother on 10X. That's because the shell was built from scratch. And so everything just ran a lot better on the Surface Neo. Now, the Neo, the reason why I think the Neo didn't ship, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is thermals and the Intel Lakefield chip. During my time with this device, now, to be clear, the hardware was near final, I'm told, but the software wasn't. The software wasn't anywhere near done, which means the drivers weren't anywhere near done. And so there was probably a lot of driver optimization that still needed to be done to sort of tame the Lakefield chip a bit further. But in my time with the device, the Neo got really warm, and and I don't just mean a bit warm like you sort of feel when a device is running a benchmark. It would get hot under normal load. Like it just overheated a lot. And so the experience was quite slow. And the reason for it is the Lakefield chip. The Lakefield chip wasn't very efficient, wasn't very powerful. And Microsoft had to do a lot of work in the firmware to tame it and sort of bring it down and calm it down. But even then, it was still running quite hot. And I think that's one of the main reasons why they had to scrap the Neo, because it was just too thin to be an Intel device in 2020. Intel's chips in 2020 were not great. And this is a 5.6 millimeter fanless PC. Like it just was a recipe for disaster. That's the main reason I think it failed. And also the fact that Lakefield was killed, like during the Neo's development life cycle, like it left it without a processor. It wasn't just one of those devices where they could recycle with an ARM chip. It was built in partnership with Intel. So when Intel killed the chip for it and there was no replacement, what could they do with the Neo? Nothing. They couldn't do it. That was it. If they were going to do this device, they'd have to build it from scratch with a completely different internal design. And at that point, given that the pandemic had sort of taken off and was in full effect at that by then, I think Microsoft just decided it wasn't worth it. Like the return on investment wasn't high enough for this form factor, and so that's how it died, unfortunately. I will say that I've had the Neo and Duo side by side. It is the best synergy between form factor categories I've ever seen. Everyone says Apple has the best synergy. No, the iPhone doesn't really look like a Mac and vice versa. The Duo looks like a small Neo. It's basically a mini version of your PC. The big one for PC tasks, the small one for phone tasks. And paired with Surface earbuds, it would have been an incredible mobile productivity ecosystem and experience. And you would have looked incredible in Starbucks. You're sitting down at the coffee table with Neo as your laptop and your Duo standing next to it and your earbuds on one side. You would have been the most insane looking guy or person there. And and I'm just sad that I never really got a chance to be that person. It would have been incredible to see the Neo ship, especially with final software and a more finalized bit of hardware. I can only imagine how much I would have loved to use that device, because in my brief time using it, although there weren't many apps, web apps worked fine. And I was able to, browse the web and stuff. And it was great. It was a good device to walk around with and take with you to places like coffee shops or on the go. Especially when it's single screen, like a 9-inch tablet, it's nice. It's in single screen mode. You can just sort of watch a movie on it. It's great. It's fantastic. And then when you want 13 inches of screen real estate, you can open it up into the dual screen mode and you can have two apps running side by side. And it is just incredible. The other design thing about the hardware I wanted to mention is that, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, the LTE SIM tray was built into the volume rocker. So if you wanted to put a SIM card in, you'd have to pull the volume buttons out, which I think is incredible. And that's a great idea for a design, a tablet design. And I'm surprised that never shipped on things like the Duo. Like, that would have probably been great on the Duo, and it would be great on other phones today. But sadly, that's a design that seems to have lived and died with the Neo. But yeah, that's basically what I have to say on it. I finally got to use one, and I can confirm it's a crying shame it never shipped. Although probably the right call, given that the pandemic happened and 10X was not far from being dead and all the other stuff that was pitted against it. It's just a shame that it never came out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can agree that it probably would not have done well.
Yeah, because imagine how much it would have been. It had to have been at least over $2,000 starting. Oh, yeah. Surely.
Yeah, at least $2,500. I would say $2,499. Yeah, I just don't think it would have done well. We would have tried to make it work, but I think people would just kind of go back to their normal laptops. Still, it goes to show you, Surface team can still make really incredible hardware when given the resources, but even that's kind of changed now. Not that I'm complaining about the current gen Surface stuff, which I think is great, but we're not going to get those experimental form factors anymore. They took a big swing with Duo, and we've been over that a million times, and it just didn't work. I think, and you think, had they stuck with it, they could have at least turned it to a niche market for them, especially with this AI stuff around now. But it is what it is, as they say. But it was cool to kind of get that final look at what could have been. I'm sure Panos was reading it with a single tear running down his face.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get some content out about it now, because I feel like enough time has passed there where Microsoft ideally shouldn't be upset anymore that content about it is getting out, because it's always inevitable. These unreleased devices, they end up, I know that a number of them have been found online in the last year or two, and so it was only a matter of time before somebody did this write up, and we figured, why not it be us? We are the biggest fans of this device. It makes sense for us to give it a sort of farewell write up, so to speak. And so we basically just wrote about what it was like to use it. And and I'm hoping the people who worked on the Surface Neo, whether they're still at Microsoft or have since departed, were able to read that and sort of smile, because this is the only time that they've had their work reviewed or criticized. Yeah, appreciate it. Exactly. And like I said, I do believe that the Neo is probably the best bit of PC hardware Surface has ever built, beating out even the Laptop 7, which I think is probably a close second. But there's something about holding that foldable dual screen, all glass, sandwich, so to speak, of a device in your hands, and being able to touch it and open apps and do things on it, and ink as well. It took ink on the pens. It's just incredible. And there is no other device like it. There is no Windows PC or Android tablet or Apple device that comes anywhere close to what the Neo was like to use as both a tablet and a laptop. And that's a shame. I'm almost tempted to write an editorial soon about just dual screen in general, and how it's not fair on us as end users that Microsoft was the one to try and push that form factor, because that sentenced it to death. If Google or Samsung or anybody else tried to do it, it would still be alive today. But because it was Microsoft, and Microsoft were the only ones to try it, the second they gave up on it, that was it. I can't go out and buy a dual screen phone right now. They don't exist. There is no replacement to the Duo, and that's because Microsoft was the company to push that forward. I wish it was Samsung, because Samsung would probably do another one and another one, and they would just keep doing it because that's what Samsung does. And it's just not fair. It's not fair that Microsoft did this to us, Dan. I can't get over it.
Yep, it is a shame, but you can imagine what it would be like today with a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip in there.
It's so annoying, because it is so that device is built for an ARM chip. I don't know why Intel came up with this. It's like, Intel, give it up. This is
Well,
impossible.
Lenovo had that too. Remember those? Lenovo had those. What were they called? The yoga books, the actual yoga books, the super thin ones, and it had a hollow keyboard.
Oh yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah, no, you're totally right. They did. That was powered by an Intel
Celeron,
Atom or Atom. Yeah,
maybe Atom.
another terrible Intel chip.
Yep, and those were co-designed also with Intel, which is why they couldn't just put Qualcomm into it. As I talked about this on the podcast, how that works is like Intel basically creates reference designs. And then if a company goes, we want to try to bring that to market, which Lenovo usually does, they get the basic reference design, and then Lenovo ThinkPad it up to their specifications and designs and all that and tweak it. But of course, it's going to ship with an Intel chip. That saved the company a lot of R&D, because Intel basically did it for them. They're like, if you put this chip in here, we know this is going to work. It's going to be like this. And, that's a big selling point to companies, because like I said, they don't have to spend the time engineering it themselves, like what the Surface team had to do. And so that's why that stuff exists. But yeah, when Zach and I both had those devices, we're like, this would be great if it had an ARM chip in it. But we have to wait till either Qualcomm gets big enough and is able to devote a hardware team to creating form factors that leverage its chip, in which case they can license those designs to HP, Dell, Lenovo, whoever, even Microsoft. Or we just have to wait for those companies to invest money to try to create another sort of genre bending type device. And, they can do it with today's hardware, but I'll be honest, there's so far the ROI on creating new form factors in PC, I would say, has been pretty low.
Yeah, for sure.
Outside of even the 2-in-1s have become less frequent. The Surface Pro design, Microsoft nailed, but we saw other OEMs try to make their own. HP had some really good attempts at this. I love their Spectre fold
the X2
tablet type. The X2, but they don't make that anymore, right? So there's not a lot of incentive here to do it, which kind of sucks. So.
I agree. That said, though, Huawei's doing some really interesting stuff when it comes to hardware in China right now. You've seen that they've got a phone called the Pure X, which is like, it's like a widescreen phone that folds sideways. I couldn't even describe it to you. It's such a strange shape. If you look it up, the Pure X, I think it's called. It's an insane shape. I would love that. That shape really appeals to me to some reason. But not just that, they also just announced, or recently announced, a laptop that's like an 18-inch foldable screen that runs its own OS, because Harmony's now built their own platform, because obviously they've been banned from using anything from America. So they've had to go out and build their like a completely proprietary OS. And so they're finally shipping it now on this laptop and their phones. It's incredible. Like the fluidity between, moving in between laptop and tablet mode is something you just wouldn't see ever on a Windows foldable. It's so far ahead of what the Western world has experienced in regards to folding devices running Windows, that it's almost alien. It's like, this can't be real. It seems like a concept, but no, they are real. And they also have I believe it has like a physical keyboard you can lay over the bottom, just like the Lenovo one does. But there's no getting around the fact that Windows is clunky on these devices, whereas Huawei's operating system is fluid as hell. Like, it's insane. You should definitely look them up if you haven't. Huawei's doing some great stuff in China, and it's such a shame that they were banned globally, because they were coming for everybody's lunch. Or globally, they're banned in America.
They're doing that with their EVs too. They demonstrated recently a car whose suspension is independently controlled for all 4 tires by AI, and they showed this car going up a giant flight of stairs, and they're cement stairs outside for like a big building or whatever. But as the car is going up, the wheels are in real time adjusting to it. So when you're in the car, it feels like a smooth ride. because the tires are going up and down and adjusting and compensating for the movement. So you're going up a flight of stairs on a car that should be bouncing all over the place, but it's completely smooth. Like, we don't have that yet. I got Croc in my Tesla, but that's about it. So yeah, China can definitely, when they throw a lot of money and resources, there is some questions about the overall quality of it, some of it, but I'll say Honor makes some really good laptops, and they might have one at IFA coming out that is really interesting, and it does run Windows. So, but yeah, they are doing some amazing innovation over there, and it's a shame that we don't have better relations, but what are we going to do? Anyway, I think that wraps it up for the podcast. We'll do some Q&A with the audience if there is any questions, but that'll be the not recorded, unfortunately. But if you want to join us, we do usually record this every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time on our YouTube channel, where you can join in live and ask us questions and interact. Otherwise, it is up on the social medias, which I go on occasionally after a big glass of vodka and stream and scream at my phone. But as always, we appreciate you guys tuning in, and thanks for listening. Take care, everyone.
Brilliant. So yes, if there's any questions, now put them in the chat. If there are no questions, we will leave. That was a nice short episode today, just over an hour. Love it. If they release Windows 12, they're going to create 4 active Windows operating systems: Windows 10, 11, Copilot Plus PC, and 12. They should focus on bringing all of the apps to a modern and efficient platform. That's why I don't think Windows 12 is going to be happening this year, or probably even next year, or maybe next year. But Windows 10 support ends this year, so there technically wouldn't be an in-support version of Windows 10 next year. There are editions that are based on the Windows 10 platform that will still be supported until as late as 2032, I think. But for consumers and most businesses, that won't be the case. Most people will ideally be moving on to Windows 11 by then. So Microsoft won't have to service these Windows 10 platforms with features and stuff, just not even bug fixes. They literally only have to give them security updates. So they won't have to maintain Windows 10 when it comes to quality. And so that's a little bit overhead. And when you mentioned Windows 11 and Copilot Plus as separate things, they're not. Copilot Plus runs on Windows 11. It's still Windows 11. It's not a separate branch or addition of Windows.
It's no difference than like the difference between Windows 11 Pro and Home.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not like, they're supporting 2 operating systems, or
right.
3 with education. It's like, that's the same OS. They just have different features.
Right.
The features aren't the OS.
It's just like installing a new additional apps on some PCs. Recall and ClickSteel are just apps that are enabled on your PC if you have the relevant hardware to power them. And so, that's one option. And then Windows 12, it does seem Microsoft is always stuck in the market with 2 versions of Windows. So, Windows 11 is fully supported today. If they do Windows 12, that Windows 11 will be fully supported for at least another 5 years. Zach, how can you buy another device after trying the Neo? Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I said in the review, I think it would have been a mistake for a lot of people to try and use the Neo as their only computer. I think it was too small to be a full-blown laptop replacement. As a companion device, amazing. As a full-blown computer, I think a lot of people would have struggled with that, especially with 10X and the lack of apps.
I agree with you 100% about it being probably an awesome companion device.
Yeah.
But then it's such an expensive companion device. There would be such contradictory messaging too, right? Because the whole idea of like a Surface Pro was like, why have a tablet and a laptop? You could just have one. And even Apple's starting to do this now. But now that it would be like, got that, have your laptop and this companion device that costs $2,500. And yeah.
If it was an inch or an inch and a half bigger, I think it would have been a much easier sell as a laptop replacement. But at 9 inches, it is just so cramped. It is tiny.
And you're right in terms of its density. Like it is between that and the glass, I would not want to drop it.
Oh God, no! Yeah, Christ.
But it was so solid feeling. Like there was no dead space in it, but it was also completely evenly balanced.
Yeah, the hinges.
It just felt like a piece of like art and jewelry almost. Not like, I mean, just like the original Surface Duo was like incredible, just bigger. Yeah.
I did hear, this was years ago now, that they for the Surface Neo 2 had the original shipped, obviously. For the Neo 2, they would have introduced an XL model, which I assume would have been 11-inch screens either side. I think I can't remember now what number I was told, but that would have been interesting.
I can see that.
Yeah. With Snapdragon chips working and gaining traction, might Microsoft revisit something like the Neo, but a little bigger, built around a Snapdragon chip? I don't think so. I think it's too experimental for the current iteration of Surface. The other thing is, it seems like the market has rejected dual screen. It's not a popular form factor. Lenovo's tried it a couple of times, or at least one time. There are a couple of OEMs that have tried it, in addition to Microsoft with the Duo, of course. And none of them have ever sold very well. And so I think that is dead, and replacing it is foldable screens.
Plus, it's not just doing the hardware.
Yeah.
It's the OS needs the support. And that's tricky because you have to then take people off of development or hire new people. And, you know, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, because it's not. I know a lot of people look at 10X and go, "Oh, that's just Windows 11." It's actually not. There's some massive differences in the shell experiences between 10X and 11, especially when it comes to windowing and dual screen capabilities. Yes, Windows 11 supports multiple monitors. It's not the same as what 10X was doing on the Neo. It's very different. So it's just important to keep that in mind. If this hasn't been discussed yet, what are your thoughts on the GitHub CEO leaving later this year, and how will GitHub change now that Microsoft Core AI will be taking over? As far as I'm aware, GitHub has been under Core AI for as long as Core AI has existed. I might be slightly wrong about that, but I think it's not. This isn't an immediate change. The only change that's happening now is that the CEO is leaving, which I guess means they're going to be under new management. But the CEO of GitHub was already under Core AI, so I don't really foresee much changing in regards to GitHub when it comes to a service that developers like to use. I think Microsoft knows what GitHub stands for, and I don't think Microsoft will try to change that formula much. How are your cats and dogs? My cats are great. How are your cats and dogs, Dan?
Doing well. Did have a small cat incident this weekend where the dog scared the cat and she sprayed. And so there's been an effort to fix that. And then you almost let the dog out in the backyard the other night, but I always go out there to check for little varmints, and sure enough, there's a skunk walking around. So that would have been a nightmare, because Abby totally would have just gone like, "Oh, I'm going to go and kill that skunk." And the skunk would have had other ideas. But yeah, no, they're all doing amazing. So thank you.
Thoughts on Microsoft Edge extending support for Windows 10 till at least October 2028? I'm not surprised. I was surprised that they had to announce it this late, because Firefox and Chrome and Opera and the other browsers have not announced an end of support date for Windows 10 yet. So I was surprised Edge even had one. It's not uncommon for browsers to support an operating system for a longer period than the operating system itself. And they do that because, well, they know users are going to keep using Windows 10 even beyond October 2025. And it doesn't make any business sense to immediately drop support for Windows 10 if you are an app maker, including Microsoft's own. 2028 is the cutoff date for all mainstream support and extended support. Sorry, all extended support for Windows 10, including for businesses. And then at that point, I believe there's only one other edition of Windows 10 that is in support until 2032. And that's, I want to say, IoT Enterprise or something like that. I can't remember. It's like a long-term servicing branch version of Windows 10 that you can only get through volume licensing. Zach, great article about Apple's pending less expensive version of MacBook. I think you guys should both think about a topic that could spec a comparable Windows laptop that you can keep Microsoft PC mindshare. Yeah, the problem with it is that if Apple does do a $600 MacBook, that is a great deal for a computer at $600, especially with the processor on the inside. It's M1 level performance, but most users
4 gigs of RAM.
Right, yeah, that's the thing. Like, people are saying, "Oh, it's going to have 8 gigs of RAM." I don't actually know. I don't think so. If Apple does a $600 MacBook, they're going to want it to be Apple Intelligent capable, and that, I think, requires at least 12 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM. And so, I don't know. If it's 8 gigs of RAM, then maybe it's less of a good deal. But if it comes with anything more than 10 gigs, I think most people won't notice.
It's very difficult to start doing hardware these days too, especially with the tariff situation going on. So it's going to be really hard, I think, for them to rein in prices without some cuts.
But yeah, I think as long as it has a good keyboard and a colorful exterior, they can skimp out on things like the display, because people don't care about displays. I've noticed, not as much as me. Like, if it's a 1080p 12-inch, or actually the rumor is it's a 13-inch screen. If it's a 1080p 13-inch display, with a good keyboard and trackpad, but with like a plastic exterior, I think that's still a winner for Apple, sadly. And can Windows PCs compete? There are sometimes that can. You do see some down at $600 on sale, but it's rare to come across a new laptop with, let's say a Snapdragon X Plus as the equivalent to what Apple's putting in this $600 MacBook. Let's say a Snapdragon X Plus. It's rare to see a Snapdragon X Plus, or even just a Snapdragon X, in a device that's been announced that ships from day one at $600. It's usually 800, 900, and you'll see it come down in pricing on sale. You just don't see a device built with the mindset of $600 set starting price. If you do, it's not a Snapdragon device. It's an Intel low-tier Intel CPU. It's got a crap display.
Yeah, I mean, the starting price, you're right, but we know my favorite laptop, one of my favorites of the year, the ZenBook A14 with an OLED display, Snapdragon X Plus chip, and 16 gigs of RAM, and 500 gigs of storage. I think it was 500. Did come down in price to $599, but you're right. The starting price was supposed to be $899, but it went up to $999, probably due to the tariff stuff. But it's got on sale for $599, which, I don't know. It's sort of like, I get your point with a lot of people will probably buy the Mac at $599 or $699 just because they want that.
Mac, yeah.
But it's more about what Apple doing that than the Windows platform trying to match it, because they have, like, whatever they're going to do with that Mac. I can tell you the ZenBook A14 would probably be a very similar or even better experience.
Agree.
But I don't think that's going to matter if you just really want your Mac,
That's why it's in my editorial, I called it the nightmare scenario for Microsoft, because there is nothing Microsoft or Windows OEMs can really do to compete at that price. Even if the laptop is spec for spec a better deal, there's something about Mac that people just want, especially if you're trying to get away from Windows, which a lot of people seem to want to do these days, especially in the mainstream. They're tired.
Or you have an iPhone. Yeah.
Or you have an iPhone, which, if you're an American, chances are you likely have an iPhone. Like, it's tough. That's really tough, a $600 MacBook. And the rumor is it's coming this fall, which is timed incredibly well at the end of support of Windows 10, where there will be millions of Windows users who are looking to buy a new computer. And Apple just comes on and goes, how about a $600 MacBook? Oh, it's textbook. So cheeky. Okay, final call for questions. If there are none, we will leave. All right, looks like we're done for questions. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be back next. No, actually, we should have mentioned it on the podcast. Damn it, I'll put it in the show notes. I'm not around next week or the week after. I'm on a work trip next week, and I'm away on vacation the week after. So the podcast will be taking a short hiatus for 2 weeks. We'll be back. What's the date? What date will we be back? We'll be back
September
4th,
right before IFA.
Right before IFA. You're not going to IFA this year, are you?
No.
No, I'm not going either. So we should be able to do the podcast. All right, cool. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back when we're back. See you later.